In the city's most exclusive restaurant, everyone trembled before Eleanor Vance, the mother of the country's most powerful billionaire. But that night, a simple waitress would do something no one had dared in decades. Look her in the eye and tell her the truth. The sound of the crystal glass shattering on the marble floor made all 50 people in the restaurant hold their breath. But it wasn't the noise that froze time. It was what came next. The deadly silence as Eleanor Vance rose from her chair. Those gray eyes that had destroyed business empires now fixed on me. I had 3 seconds to decide if I wanted to keep my job or my dignity. I chose dignity. "Mrs. Vance," I said, and my voice sounded firmer than my trembling hands suggested. "Pick up your own glass." The Summit restaurant had never known such absolute silence. Not even the clinking of cutlery could be heard. 60 eyes stared at me as if I had just signed my death warrant. Because in this city, contradicting Eleanor Vance was not a mistake. It was professional ruin. Let me rewind 3 hours to the moment my life still made sense. It was 6 p.m. when I arrived at the restaurant, pulling my maroon uniform, which already showed signs of too many washes. Mr. Davies, the manager, intercepted me at the service entrance with that look that meant trouble. "Sarah, table 12, you're serving it." My stomach clenched. Table 12 was the only table in the restaurant with its own crystal chandelier, prime location, and direct view of the private garden. They reserved it for only one person. "Her," I whispered. Mr. Davies nodded, his mustache trembling slightly. "Eleanor Vance arrived 10 minutes ago with her son, Gabriel, and she's already made 2 waitresses cry." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Sarah, I need you to be invisible. Serve, smile, and for God's sake, don't look her directly in the eyes. The last waitress who did. Well, let's just say she's now cleaning bathrooms at the bus station." I nodded, though something in my chest was already tightening. I had been working at the Summit for 6 months, 6 months avoiding this exact situation, but the universe has a cruel sense of humor. When I approached table 12, the first thing I saw was her back. Eleanor Vance was 63, but her posture was steel. Silver hair pulled back in a perfect bun, a black Chanel suit that probably cost more than my year's rent, and those hands, God, those hands with diamond rings that sparkled like warnings. To her right, her son Gabriel, 35, heir to the Vance Empire, and with a look in his eyes that I recognized immediately, contained shame. I had seen it before in other children of powerful families. That expression of someone who knows their mother is a monster but is too scared or too comfortable to do anything about it. "Good evening," I said in my best professional voice, placing the menus on the table. "Welcome to the Summit. My name is Sarah, and I'll be your. The water is lukewarm." Eleanor interrupted without even looking at me. Her voice was cold, precise, like a scalpel. "Don't they know in this restaurant that water should be served at 4 degrees Celsius? I looked at the glass. I could see condensation drops on the crystal. The water was perfectly cold. "Excuse me, ma'am, I'll bring." And the fork, she lifted the cutlery with 2 fingers, as if it were contaminated. "It has a microscopic stain. Don't you people check these things?" Gabriel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Mom, please." "Silence, Gabriel." The word came out like a whip. "I didn't ask for your opinion." She turned to me, and for the first time really looked at me. Her gray eyes scanned my worn uniform, my hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, my old shoes that I had polished 3 times that morning trying to make them presentable. And in her gaze, I saw something worse than contempt. I saw nothing, as if I were so insignificant that I didn't even merit her disdain. "Bring everything new," she ordered. "Water, cutlery, plates, everything. And when you return, make sure you don't breathe near the food. I don't know what cheap perfume you wear, but it's offensive." I wasn't wearing perfume. I couldn't afford it. "Right away, ma'am." I turned, feeling the stares from the other tables. Everyone had heard. In the kitchen, Chef David saw me enter and shook his head. What did the witch ask for now? Everything new. My hands trembled as I gathered the clean cutlery. "She says the water is lukewarm and my perfume is offensive." "You don't wear perfume?" Chef David frowned. "I know." I returned to table 12 with a fresh tray. Each step felt like walking to the gallows. I placed the fresh water, the new cutlery, the immaculate plates. I moved like a ghost, exactly as Mr. Davies had instructed. "Are you ready to order?" I asked. Eleanor didn't even open the menu. "Gabriel will order the beef Wellington. I'll have the niçoise salad, but no anchovies, no olives, no egg, and I want the tuna seared for exactly 45 seconds on each side. Not a second more, not a second less. Did you understand? Or do I need to write it down for you?" "I understood perfectly, ma'am." That remains to be seen. The next 40 minutes were a masterclass in systematic humiliation. Every time I approached the table, Eleanor found something new to criticize. The bread was too hot, the butter too cold, the candles too bright, my walking too noisy, my apologies too frequent, my silence too rude. Gabriel said not a word in my defense, only stared at his plate, cutting his meat into perfect squares, chewing in silence, while his mother tore my dignity apart piece by piece. But what truly broke me wasn't any of that. It was when I brought her salad. I had checked it 3 times in the kitchen. Chef David had personally timed the tuna sear to exactly 45 seconds per side. The presentation was perfect. I placed the plate in front of her with hands that no longer trembled from nerves, but from something deeper, something darker. Eleanor looked at the salad, took her fork, cut a piece of tuna, brought it to her mouth, chewed slowly, her eyes never leaving mine, and then, with a deliberate, calculated movement, she spat the food into her napkin. "It's dry," she declared. "Absolutely unacceptable." It wasn't dry. I knew it. David knew it. Gabriel knew it. Everyone in that damn restaurant knew it. But it wasn't about the food. It had never been about the food. It was about power. The kind of power wielded when you're so bored with your perfect life that your only entertainment is to destroy people who can't defend themselves. "I'll prepare another salad," I began. "No." Eleanor leaned back in her chair, a small smile curving her dark red lips. "I want to speak with the manager. I want them to know the kind of mediocre service they're offering. And I want," she paused, savoring each word, "for you to be fired here, now, in front of everyone." The restaurant had fallen into that silence again, that silence of spectators waiting to see blood. "Mom, that's excessive." Gabriel finally found his voice, but it was weak, pathetic. "I told you to be quiet, Gabriel." Eleanor didn't even look at him. Her eyes were fixed on me, waiting to see me beg, cry, crumble, and something inside me broke, but not in the way she expected. "You know what, Mrs. Vance?" The words came out before I could stop them. "You're right." That caught her off guard. Her eyebrows arched slightly. "You're right," I repeated, and now my voice was louder, clearer. "This service is unacceptable, because truly good service shouldn't include having to put up with a customer who treats human beings as if they were trash." The silence now was absolute. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. Eleanor turned pale, then red. She slowly rose from her chair, and that's when her hand swept the water glass off the table. The crystal exploded against the marble, with that sound I'll never forget. "How dare you?" Her voice was pure venom. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "Yes," I said, and now tears were in my eyes. But they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of years of contained rage, years of seeing people like her destroy people like me. "I know exactly who you are. You are Eleanor Vance, the woman who built an empire on the backs of employees whom you never learned to see as people. The woman everyone fears but no one respects. The woman who raised a son so terrified of her that he can't even stand up for what's right when he sees it." Gabriel had stood up. His face was a mask of shock. "Sarah!" Mr. Davies's voice came from somewhere behind me, tinged with panic, but I couldn't stop. The floodgates had opened. "And you know what's the saddest part, Mrs. Vance? That you have all the money in the world, all the power, every opportunity anyone could wish for. And yet, the only thing you know how to do with all of it is to make people who have the misfortune of crossing your path feel small." Eleanor stared at me as if I was some kind of insect that had just spoken. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "So yes," I continued, "and now I didn't care about anything. My job was lost anyway. Pick up your own glass, because for once in your privileged life, do something for yourself instead of expecting the rest of the world to kneel at your feet." The entire restaurant had stopped pretending not to look. Everyone watched us with their mouths open. Even the other servers had come out of the kitchen. And then something extraordinary happened. A woman at table 5 started to applaud, then another person at table 8, then a businessman at table 3. In a matter of seconds, the entire restaurant was applauding. It wasn't polite applause. It was an applause of liberation from every person who had ever been humiliated by someone with money and power, from every employee who had had to bite their tongue, from every human being who had dreamed of saying exactly what I had just said. Eleanor Vance, for the first time in what was probably decades, was completely speechless. But as the applause continued, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Gabriel Vance was looking at me, and in his eyes there was no anger. There was something more disturbing. There were tears. "My father," he said softly, but in the silence after the applause, everyone heard him. "My father died 6 months ago. Do you know what his last words were?" He turned to his mother, He said, "Gabriel, don't let your mother become the monster. I fear she already is." Eleanor took a step back as if she had been struck. "Gabriel, how dare you? I was too late, Dad," Gabriel continued, and now tears streamed freely down his face. "I was 35 years too late." He looked at me again, but this woman, this waitress, whom you don't even know, had the courage I never had. He took out his wallet and placed several bills on the table. Enough money to pay the bill 10 times over. "Let's go, Mom." But Eleanor didn't move. She stared at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. It wasn't rage. It wasn't humiliation. It was something more complex, something almost like recognition. "What's your name?" she finally asked. Her voice barely a whisper. "Sarah Thompson." She nodded slowly, as if memorizing the name. Then, without another word, she turned and walked towards the exit. Gabriel followed her, but before leaving, he stopped beside me. "Thank you," he murmured, "for what I should have done years ago." And then they left. The restaurant exploded in conversations. Mr. Davies approached me, his face a mixture of admiration and absolute terror. "Sarah, that was the bravest and the most stupid thing I've ever seen in my life." "I know," I said, and for the first time in years, I genuinely smiled. "I'm fired. The Vance family probably owns half this city. They could destroy this restaurant with one phone call." I nodded. I knew there would be consequences, but for the first time in my life, I had told the truth, the complete truth, unfiltered, fearless, and it felt like freedom. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that this was just the beginning, because Eleanor Vance was not the kind of woman who left things unresolved, and I had just become her most interesting project in years. 3 days after the incident, my life was a controlled disaster, or rather, a disaster with no control at all. The video had appeared online exactly 18 hours after that night. Someone in the restaurant had recorded everything. I didn't know who, and honestly, I no longer cared. The title was dramatic and perfectly designed to go viral. "Waitress destroys billionaire matriarch with the truth. You won't believe what happened next." 3 million views on the first day, 7 million on the second day. By the third day, it had crossed 15 million and was on all social media platforms. They had turned me into a meme, a symbol, everything but what I really was, a 28-year-old woman who had just lost her job and was 2 weeks away from not being able to pay her rent. Mr. Davies had called me the morning after the incident. His voice was trembling. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. The owners, the Vance family, has investments in the group that owns the Summit. They ordered me to fire you immediately. I can't even give you a letter of recommendation. I'm so sorry." I didn't blame him. I knew how this world worked. The powerful crushed, and the rest of us learned to dodge or died, trying. But what I didn't expect was the second call. That came 2 hours later from a private number. "Sarah Thompson?" The voice was masculine, professional, cold. "Yes. I'm Richard Stone, head of human resources for the Vance Group. I'm afraid I must inform you that you have been added to a blacklist in the city's hospitality and service sector. No restaurant, hotel, cafe, or similar establishment will hire you. This is effective immediately." I felt the floor disappear beneath my feet. A blacklist? Is that even legal? It's a private recommendation among associated businesses. "Good day, Miss Thompson." Click. And just like that, in less than 24 hours, I had gone from an anonymous waitress to a professional pariah with a viral video that everyone celebrated, but no one wanted to associate with their business. The irony was not lost on me. Now, 3 days later, I was sitting in my small, one-room apartment, staring at my laptop with a mixture of fascination and horror. The comments on the video were overwhelming. "Absolute queen. You go, girl." Finally, someone tells these people the truth. "Where can I donate to help this girl? They're going to destroy her. Eleanor Vance is a viper. My cousin worked for her, and she made her cry every day. The son crying broke me. Imagine having a mother like that." There were thousands more. Some defended me. Others said I had been disrespectful and deserved what happened to me. A few, the ones that scared me the most, had found my address and posted it in the comments. Knock, knock, knock. My heart stopped. I didn't expect visitors. I never expected visitors. My apartment was on the 4th floor of a walk-up building that had seen better days in the ADS. The only people who knocked on my door were the landlord when he wanted rent or food delivery drivers who had the wrong address. Knock, knock, knock. More insistent. This time I got up from the sofa bed, which also served as my dining area and desk, and approached the door. There was a peephole, but it was so scratched I could barely see through it. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice firmer than I felt. "Miss Thompson, we need to talk." It was a female voice, cultured, with an accent I had heard in the city's upper echelons. My stomach clenched. "I'm not interested in interviews," I said. "I've already turned down 3 TV shows. I'm not a journalist. I'm Charlotte Hayes, a lawyer. I represent Mrs. Eleanor Vance." The world tilted slightly. I opened the door with the security chain still on. Through the crack, I saw a woman in her 40s wearing a pearl gray power suit that probably cost more than 6 months of my old rent. She carried a leather briefcase and an expression that revealed absolutely nothing. "What do you want?" I asked. "5 minutes of your time, please." It wasn't a plea. It was a statement of fact, as if my agreement was a mere formality. Against all my survival instincts, I opened the door. Charlotte Hayes entered my apartment with the same expression she would probably use to enter a boardroom or a courtroom. Her eyes scanned the space in 2 seconds. The kitchenette, which was basically an electric burner and a mini fridge, the sofa bed folded against the wall, the small table with my laptop surrounded by empty coffee cups, the window with a view of an alley where cats fought over garbage every night. She said nothing about the apartment. Points for her. "I'll get straight to the point, Miss Thompson," she said, placing her briefcase on my table and pulling out a folder. "My client, Mrs. Eleanor Vance, wishes to offer you a proposal." I almost laughed. "A proposal? Your client blacklists me, and now wants to make me a proposal?" "Precisely." Charlotte opened the folder, revealing perfectly organized documents. "Mrs. Vance acknowledges that her actions may have been excessive. The blacklist will be removed effectively today at 5 p.m. Furthermore, you will receive compensation of $50,000 for the loss of your employment and damages to your professional reputation." $50,000 was more money than I had seen in my entire life. "What's the catch?" I asked. "Because there was always a catch with people like Eleanor Vance." Charlotte smiled slightly. It was a smile practiced in expensive law schools and perfected in boardrooms where destinies were decided. "Mrs. Vance wishes for you to work for her." The silence that followed was so dense I could have cut it with a knife. "Excuse me?" was all I could articulate. "As her personal assistant, starting salary of $10,000 annually, plus full benefits, including housing, and an additional signing bonus of $30,000. Charlotte slid a contract across the table. "It's an extremely generous offer." "It's insane," I said, finding my voice. "Your client hates me." I publicly confronted her, humiliated her. Why on earth would she want me to work for her? "Why?" said a voice from the doorway, a voice I recognized immediately. "You're the first person in 30 years who has told me the truth." I turned around so quickly I almost lost my balance. Eleanor Vance was standing in the doorway of my apartment. I don't know how I hadn't heard her climb the stairs. I don't know how she had gotten past the building's main door, which supposedly required a code. I knew nothing, except that suddenly the most powerful woman in the city was in my small apartment, looking at me with those gray eyes that had haunted my nightmares for 3 nights. But there was something different about her, something I hadn't seen in the restaurant. She looked tired. The lines around her eyes were more pronounced. Her perfect makeup couldn't completely hide the dark circles, and her posture, though still erect, had an invisible weight on her shoulders. "Mrs. Vance," I said, and I hated that my voice sounded shaky. "Sarah." My name sounded strange on her lips. "I can leave if you want. Charlotte can handle the details. But I came personally because you needed to see that this isn't a trap." "It's not a trap?" I repeated, finding some of my previous courage. "You destroyed my career in less than 24 hours. You made me untouchable in this entire city. And now you want me to believe this is what? An act of benevolence?" "No," said Eleanor, and to my complete surprise, she entered the apartment and closed the door behind her. "It's pure selfishness." That stopped me. She walked towards the window, looking out into the alley. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, almost human. That video had 15 million views. I've watched it 143 times. She turned to look at me. "Do you know how many people in my life have ever spoken to me like that? With that brutal honesty, that unfiltered truth? I have no idea. 0. Until you." She slowly removed her leather gloves, a gesture that seemed more vulnerable than it should be. "My husband died 6 months ago. Hector. We were married 40 years, and on his deathbed, do you know what he told me?" I didn't answer. I didn't know if I should. He told me that I had lost myself, that the woman he fell in love with had disappeared so long ago that he couldn't even remember what her laugh sounded like anymore. Her eyes gleamed, but not with tears, with something harder. He told me that I had become exactly what I feared most, my own mother. The air in the apartment felt heavy, charged with truths I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. "For 6 months, Eleanor continued, I've been trying to understand what he meant. I've analyzed every decision I made, every word I said, every person I hurt on my way to success, and I found no answers, because everyone around me tells me what I want to hear. They tell me I'm brilliant, powerful, inspiring, but you know that's not true, I said softly. I know it's only part of the truth, the convenient part. She looked at me directly, and then you came along, a 8-year-old waitress who had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And yet, you told me exactly what no one else dares to say, and you destroyed me for it. Yes, she didn't deny it. She didn't apologize, because it's what I do. It's what I've done my whole life. Someone challenges me, and I crush them. It's instinct at this point. Automatic. And now what? I asked. You want me to be your personal conscience? Your mirror of uncomfortable truths? I want, Eleanor said, and now there was something almost desperate in her voice. For someone to stop me before it's too late. Gabriel looks at me with fear. My employees avoid me. My friends are just people who want something from me, and I'm alone in a 20-room mansion, slowly becoming the kind of person my own son can't even love. The silence that followed was broken by Charlotte, who had been observing everything with a professionally neutral expression. The contract is for 1 year, she said, returning to practical details. With a mutual exit clause after 3 months, if both parties agree, it's not working. Full confidentiality, of course. I looked at the contract. The numbers danced before my eyes. $120,000 a year, $30,000 bonus, $50,000 compensation. It was a total of $200,000. It was a completely different life. It was also potentially a gilded cage. Why should I trust you? I asked Eleanor directly. You showed exactly what you're capable of. When someone challenges you, you shouldn't trust me, Eleanor replied with surprising honesty. You should go in with your eyes wide open, knowing that I am difficult, demanding, and that I will probably make your life miserable at least half the time. And the other half? For the first time, I saw something that might have been a real smile on her face. The other half? You'll learn how the world really works at the top. You'll meet people who can open doors you didn't even know existed. And who knows, her expression softened slightly. Perhaps we'll both learn something. I looked at Charlotte, who maintained her perfectly neutral expression. I looked at the contract with all those zeros. I looked at my tiny apartment with its sofa bed and its alley view. And I looked at Eleanor Vance, this complex, broken woman who had been my personal villain 3 days ago. I need 24 hours to think about it, I finally said. Of course. Charlotte closed her briefcase with a satisfied click. My number is on the first page of the contract. Call before 5 p.m. tomorrow. Eleanor put on her gloves, preparing to leave, but stopped at the door, looking at me one last time. Sarah, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe, just maybe, we could both benefit from this madness. And then she left, leaving behind the scent of her expensive perfume and a contract that could change my life. I sat on my sofa bed for hours after they left, staring at the papers. My phone kept ringing with messages from friends who had seen the video, reporters who wanted interviews, strangers on the internet who had opinions about my life. But there was one message that made me stop. It was from an unknown number. It's Gabriel. I got your number through. Well, it doesn't matter how. I just wanted to say, if you decide to work for my mother, proceed with caution. But also, thank you. For the first time in years, I saw her truly look in the mirror. Whatever comes next, you started something. Gee. I looked out my window into the alley where 2 cats fought over an old piece of pizza. I thought of Hector Vance, a man who had spent 40 years watching his wife become something he didn't recognize. I thought of Gabriel, a son who loved his mother but feared becoming her. And I thought of myself, of the girl who had grown up in neighborhoods like this, who had worked 3 jobs to pay for university, who had learned that dignity was sometimes the only thing they couldn't take from you. Was I willing to risk that dignity for $200,000 and the vague promise of learning something? My phone rang again. This time, it was my landlord, Sarah. I need to talk to you about the overdue rent. Tomorrow, no excuses. I looked at the contract. Sometimes the universe doesn't give you a clear choice between good and evil. Sometimes it just gives you a choice between surviving or sinking with your pride intact. And I had always been a survivor. The Vance mansion wasn't a house. It was a declaration of war against humility. I passed through the enormous wrought iron gates at exactly 7 a.m., just as Charlotte had instructed. A silent chauffeur had picked me up from my apartment 30 minutes earlier, driving a black Mercedes that smelled of new leather and old money. He hadn't spoken to me. He hadn't even looked at me in the rearview mirror. Apparently, That was the tone I should expect. The driveway snaked through gardens that looked like they were out of a European magazine. Marble fountains, perfectly trimmed geometric hedges, statues that were probably worth more than my entire life. And at the end of it all, the mansion. 3 floors of neoclassical architecture with white columns, wrought iron balconies, and enough windows so the sun never found a dark corner to hide in. Miss Thompson, a woman, appeared at the front door before I could ring the bell. She was about 50, with grey hair pulled back in a severe bun and wearing a simple black dress that screamed, "I've seen things that would make you quit on your first day. I'm Teresa Dubois, head of staff. Follow me." There was no welcome, no congratulations on the job, just a follow me that made it clear no time was wasted on unnecessary pleasantries here. The interior was exactly what you'd expect. Marble floors that reflected everything like mirrors, a curved staircase that majestically ascended to the upper floors, crystal chandeliers that probably required an entire team just to clean them, art on the walls that I recognized from my art history classes, a Monet, a Renoir, a damn Picasso in the hallway as if it were just any poster. "Mrs. Vance is waiting for you in her office," Teresa said as we climbed the staircase. "She arrived at 5 a.m. She always arrives at 5 a.m. You will be available from 6:30. Understood?" "It's not understood, Miss Thompson. It's a non-negotiable reality. Mrs. Vance does not accept delays, excuses, or incompetence. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear." Teresa stopped in front of a dark wooden door inlaid with what looked like real gold. She knocked twice, waited exactly 3 seconds, and opened it. "Mrs. Vance, Miss Thompson has arrived." The office was the size of my old apartment multiplied by 4. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city. Mahogany bookcases filled with volumes that looked more like decoration than actual reading. And in the center, behind a desk that had probably belonged to some 19th century magnate, was Eleanor Vance. She didn't look at me immediately. She was typing something on a tablet, her fingers moving with a precision that spoke of decades of practice. She wore an immaculate white suit that contrasted dramatically with her silver hair. Not a wrinkle, not a hair out of place. 10 seconds passed, 20, 30. Finally, she looked up. "You're on time," she said, as if that was barely acceptable. "That's more than I can say for your predecessor." She lasted 4 days before resigning in tears. "Good morning to you too," I replied, and I saw the slightest flicker of something in her eyes. Amusement, irritation. It was impossible to tell. "Sit down." She pointed to a chair opposite her desk. "We have a lot to cover and little time to do it." I sat, keeping my back straight. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me intimidated, although my heart pounded like a war drum. "Your role," Eleanor began, "is not to be my friend. It's not to be my confidant. It's not to make me feel better about myself. Your role is to keep my life organized, anticipate problems before they occur." And she paused, her eyes fixed on mine. "Tell me when I'm about to do something Hector would have hated." That last part took me by surprise. "Excuse me? You heard right." She leaned back in her chair. "My husband had a moral compass that I've lost somewhere in the last 20 years. You demonstrated in the restaurant that you have one. I need it. I'm not your hired conscience," I said carefully. "You're my assistant who just happens to have the backbone most people in my life lost a long time ago." She stood up, walking towards the windows. "Today I have 4 meetings. One with the board of directors of the children's hospital my family founded, another with investors for the new real estate development in the historic district, then lunch with the mayor, and finally a video call with our partners in Singapore." She took a folder from her desk and slid it towards me. "Read this. These are the backgrounds for each meeting. You have 20 minutes. I opened the folder. There were at least 100 pages of dense information, financial reports, biographies of key people, market analysis, projections. My head began to spin. 20 minutes? I repeated. 18 now, she said, looking at her watch. Time's ticking. The next 18 minutes were a blur of information that I could barely process. I learned that the children's hospital was in financial crisis, that the real estate development threatened to displace hundreds of low-income families, that the mayor was pushing for regulations that would affect Vance businesses, that the partners in Singapore were considering withdrawing from a $50 million deal. When Eleanor returned, I had a massive headache and had taken frantic notes in a notebook Teresa had given me. "Summary," Eleanor ordered. 30 seconds. I took a deep breath. "The hospital needs money, but you don't want to just write a check because it would set a precedent. The real estate development is profitable, but ethically questionable. The mayor wants something from you, and you want something from her. Singapore is a power play, and whoever blinks first loses. Eleanor studied me for a long moment. Then, to my complete surprise, she smiled. A small but real smile. Hector would have said exactly that, she murmured. More to herself than to me. Good. Let's go. The first meeting was with the hospital board. 8 people around a conference table in the east wing of the mansion, all impeccably dressed, all with carefully neutral expressions, all clearly terrified of Eleanor. My role was simple: sit in a chair against the wall, take notes, and remain invisible. For 40 minutes, I listened as they discussed numbers, projections, budget cuts. The hospital needed $2 million to stay open another year. Eleanor offered them $500,000 with strict conditions. Staff reductions, closure of 2 wards, increased fees. That means the poorest families won't be able to afford treatment, said one of the board members, a doctor in his 60s with a worried expression. Then the hospital will close completely, and no one will receive treatment, Eleanor replied coldly. It's basic economics, Dr. Miller. It's inhumane, he muttered. The silence in the room was absolute. Everyone looked at Eleanor, waiting for the explosion, the destruction of Dr. Miller. And then I felt something, that same fire I had felt in the restaurant, that impulse that had gotten me into this mess in the first place. Excuse me, I said, my voice cutting the silence like a knife. Everyone turned to look at me. Eleanor raised an eyebrow but didn't stop me. What if, instead of closing wards, we sought additional donations? Fundraising events, specifically aimed at keeping treatment accessible for low-income families. The Vance family could match every dollar raised. Dr. Miller looked at me as if I had just suggested flying to the moon. The other board members seemed confused about whether to listen to me or ignore me. Eleanor said nothing for 5 full seconds. Then, "Get out of the room, Sarah." My stomach sank. I stood up, walking towards the door, my legs barely supporting me. I had lasted exactly 1 hour and 12 minutes in my new job before completely ruining it. But when I reached the door, Eleanor spoke again. "Wait outside. I'll call you back in 10 minutes. I closed the door behind me, breathing heavily. Teresa was in the hallway, her expression as neutral as ever. "How much do you bet she fires me before lunch?" I asked her. "I don't bet, Miss Thompson," she replied. "But if I did, I'd bet you'll last longer than you think." I saw her look at him when he spoke, and it wasn't the look she gives people before she destroys them. It was the look she gave Mr. Hector when he challenged her. Teresa almost smiled. Almost. That's the look of someone remembering what it's like to be human. Exactly 10 minutes later, the door opened. Dr. Miller came out first, and when he saw me, he nodded slightly. Respect, perhaps, or gratitude. The other board members followed, all with less tense expressions than when they had entered. Eleanor was the last to leave. She looked at me directly. "Next time you have an idea during a meeting," she said, her voice cold but not furious, "write it on a note and pass it to me. Don't interrupt." "Yes, ma'am." That said, she paused. "Your idea was good. We will implement it. The hospital will receive the full $1 million with the condition that they raise another $1 million in 6 months. We will match it." I didn't know what to say. I had expected to be fired, humiliated, destroyed. "Thank you," I murmured. "Don't thank me. Hector would have done the same. You just reminded me how to." She turned to leave, then stopped. "And Sarah, the next meeting is in 30 minutes. Get ready. It won't be so easy." As I watched her walk away, Teresa approached me. "Welcome to the Vance mansion, Miss Thompson," she said with the slightest hint of warmth in her voice. "I think you might survive here after all." By the second week at the Vance mansion, I learned that hell has many faces, and all of them wore my boss's face. I had started to believe, in some naive corner of my mind, that maybe Eleanor Vance really wanted to change, that the moment in the restaurant had been a turning point, that her dead husband's words had planted a seed of transformation. How foolish I was. It was Tuesday afternoon when everything fell apart. I was in Eleanor's office reviewing the day's correspondence when I heard the screams. Not a singular scream. A female voice cutting through the mansion walls like a knife. "I need to see her. I need to see that bitch right now." I jumped up, my heart already racing. Teresa appeared in the doorway. Her usually serene face was now tense, with something that looked like fear. "Miss Thompson, Mrs. Vance needs you to." But she didn't finish the sentence, because the main lobby door burst open and a woman stormed into the office like a human hurricane. She was in her 40s, dark hair, disheveled, eyes puffy from crying, and wearing clothes that had once been elegant but were now wrinkled, as if she had slept in them for days. In her right hand, she held a manila envelope. Her left hand trembled. "Claudia." Eleanor's voice came out cold as Arctic ice from her desk. She hadn't moved. She hadn't even looked up from her computer. "You don't have an appointment." "Appointment?" The woman, Claudia, laughed. But there was no humor in that sound, only pain distilled into laughter. "I need an appointment to ask you why you destroyed my life." Now Eleanor looked up, and the expression on her face made my blood run cold. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't guilt. It was boredom. Absolute boredom, as if this broken woman in front of her was barely a minor inconvenience in her perfectly planned day. "Teresa," Eleanor said calmly, "call security." "No." Claudia approached the desk, throwing the envelope in front of Eleanor. Photographs scattered across the mahogany surface. "Look at them. Look at them." For the first time, I saw Eleanor hesitate. Her eyes moved to the photographs, and something small but undeniable, flickered in her expression. I shouldn't have. It wasn't my place. But I moved close enough to see the images. A girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, dark hair in pigtails, a huge smile showing a missing tooth. In one photo, she was on a swing, in another holding an ice cream, in another hugging a woman I recognized as a younger, happier Claudia. Her name was Valeria, Claudia said, and her voice cracked with every syllable. My daughter was 10 years old. The use of the past tense hit me like a punch to the gut. "Claudia, this isn't appropriate," Eleanor began. "Isn't appropriate?" Claudia slammed both hands on the desk, making the photographs jump. "Do you know what's not appropriate? Firing a single mother because she took 3 days off when her daughter was in the hospital. Do you know what's not appropriate? Blacklisting her so she couldn't get another job. Do you know what's not appropriate?" Her voice rose to a scream. "That my daughter died because I couldn't afford her treatment, because you took everything from me." The silence that followed was so dense it hurt to breathe. I looked at Eleanor. I don't know what I expected. Shock, remorse, horror at what she had done. But what I saw was worse than anything I could have imagined. I saw nothing. "Claudia," Eleanor said, and her voice was professional, distant, as if she were rejecting a vacation request. "You worked in the finance department. You knew the policies. 3 unjustified absences are grounds for immediate termination. My daughter was dying, and I regret your loss, sincerely." But there was no sincerity in those words. They were just empty, mechanical words. However, rules exist for a reason. If I make an exception for you, I would have to make it for everyone. Something inside me broke at that moment. It wasn't a loud break. It was silent, like when thin ice finally gives way under weight. "Mrs. Vance," I said, my voice trembling, "could we speak in private?" Eleanor looked at me as if she had just remembered I was in the room. "Sarah, this doesn't concern you. With all due respect," and my voice was firmer now, "it does concern me. I'm your assistant, and part of my job is to prevent you from doing things that—" I searched for the right words, "that Hector would have hated." Her dead husband's name dropped into the room like a bomb. Eleanor's mask cracked for just a second, just enough for me to see something dark and twisted underneath. Pain, perhaps, or fury, or both. "Get out," she told Claudia. "I'm not finished." "Yes, you are." And now there was fire in Eleanor's voice. Real fire. "You have entered my home uninvited. You have made accusations. You have interrupted my day. Security will escort you out." 2 security men had appeared at the door. Large, intimidating, professional. Claudia looked at me then, and in her eyes, I saw something that would haunt me for weeks. Hope that I, this stranger who worked for her enemy, could do something. "Anything, please," she whispered. I just wanted her to know what she did. I just wanted her to see my Valeria. The guards gently took her arms. She didn't resist. There was no fight left in her, only raw, exhausted pain. As they led her away, I picked up one of the photographs from the desk, the one of Valeria with the ice cream. Her smile was so pure, so full of life. And now she was dead. 10 years old and dead because her mother couldn't afford treatment that for Eleanor Vance would have been the equivalent of a tip in an expensive restaurant. "Put that photograph down," Eleanor ordered. I didn't. "Eleanor," and I used her first name for the first time. "Are you really going to sit there and pretend that what you did to this woman was okay?" I applied company policies that are there for specific reasons. "A child is dead. A child died," Eleanor corrected. And the fact that she could make that grammatical distinction at this moment physically sickened me. From a medical condition. That's a tragedy, but it wasn't caused by me. "Seriously?" I threw the photograph onto her desk. "Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night?" Eleanor stood up so quickly that her chair rolled backward. "Careful, Sarah, you're crossing a line." Well, and now I was yelling too. All the professionalism, All the caution I had maintained for 2 weeks evaporated. Because apparently, someone needs to cross your damn lines. You told me you hired me to stop you, to tell you the truth. Well, here's your truth. I approached her desk, looking directly into those gray eyes that had lost all warmth. You are exactly the monster your husband feared. You're not changing, you're not learning anything. You're still the same woman who destroys lives without batting an eye. Because policies are more important than people. Rules are more important than compassion. Your damn pride is more important than a child's life. Enough, no, and now tears were streaming down my face. But I didn't care, because, you know what? I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was something salvageable in you. That the talk about Hector, about wanting to change, about needing someone to stop you, that all of that was real. But it's not. You're just a lonely woman who wants to feel better about herself, without actually doing the work of being better. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Teresa, who had been at the door all this time, seemed to have stopped breathing. Eleanor stared at me with an expression I couldn't read. It wasn't fury, it wasn't shame, it was something deeper, something darker. When she finally spoke, her voice was dangerously low. Are you finished? Yes, I said, wiping my tears. I'm finished with this speech, with this job, with this charade that you actually want to change. Good. Eleanor walked to the windows, turning her back to me. Then you can leave, pack your things and go tonight. I should have felt victorious. I should have felt like I had done the right thing, but all I felt was emptiness. I headed for the door, but Eleanor's voice stopped me. Sarah. I turned. She still had her back to me, looking out at the city through the window. That child, she said, and for the first time, her voice trembled, only slightly, barely perceptible. Her name was Valeria Davies. She suffered from a terminal illness. She needed an advanced medical procedure that cost $200,000. Her mother worked for me for 8 years. She was good at her job, efficient, never asked for anything. She turned to look at me, and what I saw on her face made me take a step back. It wasn't the mask of ice. It wasn't professional boredom. It was pain, raw, unfiltered pain. And I fired her because the rules said I should, because I had built an empire on rules and structure, and never making exceptions. Because if I started to see my employees as people, as human beings with lives and families and tragedies, her voice cracked, then I would have to admit that I've been building my empire on the broken backs of people exactly like Claudia. She sat heavily in her chair, suddenly looking much older than her 63 years. Valeria died 3 years ago, and I knew it. Claudia sent me an email when it happened. I didn't reply. I filed it away and went on with my life, because that's the kind of person I am. She covered her face with her hands, and for the first time since I met her, I saw Eleanor Vance cry. They weren't delicate tears. They were sobs that shook her entire body. Hector knew. I don't know how, but he knew. And he looked at me differently after that, as if he had finally seen who I really was. And he was right to fear it. He was right about everything. I didn't know what to do. Every instinct told me to leave this broken woman in her multi-million-dollar office with her tears and her guilt, to take my dignity and run before I drowned in this darkness. But I had seen something in her eyes, something I recognized because I had felt it myself. It wasn't just guilt. It was despair. The desperation of someone who finally sees the monster in the mirror and doesn't know how to stop it. Slowly, I approached her desk. I picked up the photograph of Valeria with the ice cream. "Where is Claudia now?" I asked softly. Eleanor looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "What? Claudia Davies. Where does she live? Does she have other children? A job? I don't know. After Valeria died, she disappeared. No one knows where she went. Find her. It wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. Use all your resources, all your money, all your power. Find her, Eleanor. I can't bring her daughter back." "No," I interrupted. "You can't, but you can acknowledge what you did. You can apologize, and you can do everything in your power to help her now. Not because that changes the past, but because it's what a decent person would do." Eleanor looked at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Teresa," she called, her voice still hoarse from crying. "I need you to find all the information about Claudia Davies. Current address, employment status, everything." Teresa entered, her expression carefully neutral, though her eyes showed surprise. "Right away, Mrs. Vance." When she left, Eleanor and I remained in silence. Finally, she spoke. "I still want you to leave." My heart sank. "But not today," she continued. I need you to be here when we find Claudia. I need you to make sure I do this right. Because clearly, Left to my own devices, I'll find a way to mess it up. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't full acknowledgement, but it was something, a microscopic step in the right direction. Okay, I said, but with one condition, which is, every time you make a decision that affects someone's life, firing someone, denying someone help, using your power to crush someone, I want you to remember this photograph. I placed Valeria's picture in the center of her desk. I want you to remember that the policies and the rules and the empire you built have faces, names, lives. Eleanor looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then, with trembling hands, she took it and placed it in an empty frame on her desk. A frame that, I realized, had been empty since I started working here. Valeria Davies, she whispered. I won't forget again. That night, as I prepared to leave, Gabriel appeared at the door of the office they had assigned me. I heard what happened, he said. Teresa told me. And for the first time in 3 years, I saw my mother cry. He looked at me with a strange expression, something between gratitude and fear. My father tried for 40 years to make her see, to feel. You did it in 2 weeks. I'm not sure that's a good thing, I admitted. Maybe some monsters can't change. Or maybe, Gabriel said softly, they need to see how much damage they've caused before they can start to repair it. He left, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I didn't know if Eleanor Vance could truly change. I didn't know if we would find Claudia or if an apology would mean anything after 3 years of pain. But I knew one thing. I had seen Eleanor Vance break. I had seen the cracks in the armor, and through those cracks, for the first time, I had seen something that resembled a human being. The question was, would it be enough? Finding Claudia Davies took exactly 48 hours. When you have the kind of resources Eleanor Vance possesses, there aren't many places someone can hide. Private investigators, bank contacts, access to databases that people like me didn't even know existed. Money opens doors, and when those doors don't open, money simply knocks them down. Claudia lived on the outskirts of the city, in an apartment building that made mine look like a palace. 4th floor, no elevator, damp walls, hallways that smelled of fried food and decades of accumulated despair. I stood in front of door 4C, with Eleanor beside me. Neither of us had spoken during the car ride. The chauffeur had dropped us off at the entrance, and Eleanor had insisted on climbing the stairs with me. No bodyguards, no lawyers, just the two of us. Are you sure about this? I asked her for the 3rd time. No. Her voice was firm, but her hands trembled slightly. But I think that's precisely the point, isn't it? If I were sure, it would mean I don't understand the gravity of what I did. I knocked on the door. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. This time we heard movement inside, shuffling footsteps, then a hoarse, cautious voice. Mrs. Davies? I said, keeping my voice as soft as possible. My name is Sarah Thompson. I came with someone who needs to speak with you. It's important. Silence. Then the sound of multiple locks being opened. The door opened just a crack, held by a security chain. Claudia's face appeared in the space. She looked worse than when she had burst into the mansion. Deeper dark circles, paler skin, as if the last 2 days had consumed her from within. And then she saw Eleanor. No. The word came out as a hiss. No, 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 no. She tried to close the door, but I put my foot in the frame. Please, I pleaded. Just 5 minutes. If after that you want us to leave, we will. I promise. What else can she take from me? Claudia's eyes were glazed, but not with tears, with something deeper, more dangerous. She already took everything. My job, my dignity, my daughter. I know, Eleanor said, and her voice was barely a whisper. And I didn't come to ask for your forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I came to tell you that you were right, about everything. Claudia looked at us for what seemed like an eternity. Then she slowly closed the door. We heard the chain being removed. The door opened completely. The apartment was small, one room that served as a living room and bedroom, a kitchenette in a corner, a door presumably leading to a bathroom. The walls were bare, except for one thing. Photographs of Valeria, dozens of them covering every available inch. Valeria as a baby. Valeria on her first day of school. Valeria blowing out birthday candles. Valeria in the hospital with a bald head from chemotherapy, but bravely smiling at the camera. A sanctuary. That's what this place was. A sanctuary for a dead child. Eleanor stopped in the center of the room, looking at the photographs. I watched as her mask of control, that armor she wore so naturally, began to crack. She was beautiful, she finally said. She was. Claudia didn't sit down. She stood by the door, arms crossed, as if ready to run or fight at any moment. Smart too. She got the best grades in her class. She wanted to be a veterinarian. Claudia. Claudia raised a hand. You said 5 minutes. Don't waste them on empty words. Say what you came to say. Eleanor nodded. She took off her gloves. A gesture I had learned meant she was lowering her defenses, and placed them in her purse. You worked for me for 8 years. In that time, you were never late. You never made a major mistake in your reports. You were efficient, professional, and loyal. And when your daughter got sick, when your world was falling apart, I fired you, not because it was necessary, but because my policies were more important to me than your life. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I could have made an exception. I could have given you medical leave. I could have helped with the treatment costs. God knows money meant nothing to me, but I didn't because I was more concerned with maintaining control, with not showing weakness, than with seeing the person in front of me. Claudia said nothing, only stared at Eleanor with an expression I couldn't read. And afterwards, Eleanor continued, When you wrote to me about Valeria, I read that email. I read it 3 times, and then I filed it away and went on with my life as if it meant nothing, as if your pain meant nothing. Now tears were streaming down Eleanor's face. She didn't wipe them away. She let them fall freely. I can't give you your daughter back. I can't give you those 3 years back. I can't change the kind of person I was. But I can tell you this. You were right. I am responsible. Not directly, not legally, but morally. I am responsible, and that will haunt me every day for the rest of my life. The silence in the apartment was absolute. I could hear the traffic on the street below, the drip of a faucet somewhere, my own breathing. Then Claudia spoke, and her voice was laden with years of pain. Do you know what's the worst part? It's not that you fired me. It's not even that you put me on that blacklist, so no other place would hire me. The worst part is that when Valeria asked me why we couldn't afford her treatment, I had to lie to her. I had to tell her that everything would be okay when I knew it wouldn't be. And in her last days, when she was in that horrible public hospital, she looked at me and said, Mom, it's okay. It's not your fault. Claudia wiped her eyes furiously. But it was my fault. It was my fault for not being strong enough to fight more, for accepting your decision, for not making more noise, for not demanding justice. And now you come here with your tears and your apologies. And what am I supposed to do with that? Nothing, Eleanor said simply. I didn't come expecting your forgiveness. I came because you needed to hear it from my mouth. That you were right, that you're not crazy, that your daughter died because I valued rules more than lives. She took an envelope from her purse, a thick one. This isn't a bribe, it's not compensation. It's, I don't know what it is, a pathetic attempt to do something, anything. She placed it on the small table. It's enough to live comfortably for years, to go back to school if you want, to start over. Claudia looked at the envelope as if it were poison. You think your money fixes anything? No, Eleanor replied immediately. I know it doesn't, but it's the only thing I have to offer. What you had to offer, Claudia said, her voice trembling, was compassion, humanity, and you denied it to me when I needed it most. You're right. Stop saying that. Claudia finally exploded. Stop agreeing with me. Fight. Justify yourself. Be the monster I need you to be so I can hate you cleanly. But Eleanor just shook her head. I'm not going to do that, because you've carried enough pain. I'm not going to add the burden of my ego too. Claudia then collapsed. She literally fell apart, falling to her knees, sobs shaking her entire body. And to my complete surprise, Eleanor knelt beside her. She didn't touch her. She didn't try to comfort her. She just stayed there, kneeling on the floor of this horrible apartment, crying alongside this woman whose life she had destroyed. I stood frozen by the door, feeling like an intruder in this moment of shared grief. I don't know how much time passed, 5 minutes, 10, an eternity compressed into moments. Finally, Claudia spoke, her voice hoarse. I want you to do something for me. Anything, Eleanor said immediately. I want you to create a fund in Valeria's name for families who can't afford medical treatments for their children. And I want to be involved. I want to approve every application. I want to make sure no other mother has to choose between working and saving her child. Eleanor looked up, her eyes red but clear. I will. You have my word. Your word means nothing to me, Claudia said harshly, but you'll do it anyway, because if you don't, I'll go to every newspaper, every TV channel, every platform that will listen to me, and I'll tell them this story. You don't need to threaten me, Eleanor replied. I'll do it because it's the right thing to do. And why? She hesitated. Because Hector would have wanted me to. And maybe if I do enough things he would have approved of, someday I can look in the mirror without hating myself. Claudia finally took the envelope, opened it. I saw her eyes widen at the amount. "This is $1 million, Eleanor said. For you. The Valeria Fund will be additional. $10 million initially, plus every year." "Why?" Claudia whispered. "Because none of this should have happened. And although I can't change the past, I can make sure the future is different." We left shortly after. Claudia didn't accompany us to the door. She just stayed sitting on the floor of her apartment, holding the envelope and looking at her daughter's photographs. In the car back, neither of us spoke for the first 10 minutes. Then Eleanor broke the silence. "Thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For forcing me to do that. For not letting me escape. For being exactly what I needed, even though I didn't want it." "Was it worth it?" I asked. "Do you feel better?" "No." Her answer was immediate. "I feel worse, because now it's real. Before, it was just something I had filed away in my mind. Now it's a real person with real pain that I caused, and I have to live with that." "Good," I said softly, "because that's the beginning of change. Not feeling better, but feeling more." Eleanor looked at me with something that might have been respect or perhaps gratitude. It was hard to tell. "Hector used to say something similar," she murmured. "He said that I had built walls so high to protect myself from pain that I had also blocked myself from joy, that I had chosen to feel less instead of feeling more. And now," she said, looking out the window at the city she practically owned, "I feel too much. And it's terrifying." That night, as I worked in my office, Gabriel appeared at the door. "Mom told me about Claudia," he said, "about the fund, and for the first time in my life, I'm proud of her." His eyes gleamed. "That's strange. To be proud of someone for finally doing what they should have done from the beginning." "I don't think so," I said. "I think it's human." He sat in the chair opposite my desk, looking younger than his 35 years. "Sarah, do you really think she can change? Or are we just witnessing a moment of guilt that will pass?" It was the question I had been asking myself since we left Claudia's apartment. "Honestly," I said, "I don't know, but I know this. Your mother had the option to make it easy. Send money through lawyers, remain distant, protect her ego. And instead, she chose to kneel on the floor of a horrible apartment and admit her mistakes. That counts for something." Gabriel nodded slowly. "My father would have agreed with you. After he left, I was left alone with my thoughts. I thought of Valeria, a child I never knew, but who would now live in a frame on Eleanor's desk. I thought of Claudia, carrying a pain no amount of money could heal. I thought of Eleanor, finally learning to feel after decades of numbness. And I thought of myself, of how I had gotten here, of whether I was making any real difference." My phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Thank you for bringing her, for forcing her to see. I don't forgive, but maybe someday I can. Claudia, it was enough. For now, it was enough." 3 weeks after the encounter with Claudia, life at the Vance mansion had found a strange rhythm. It wasn't peace, it wasn't harmony. It was more like an uneasy truce where everyone walked on eggshells, waiting for the next outburst. But it didn't come. Eleanor had changed subtly but undeniably. She said please and thank you to employees. She asked about their families. She had implemented a paid medical leave program across all her companies. The Valeria Davies Foundation had officially been announced with a press conference where Eleanor, with Claudia by her side, had spoken openly about her mistake and her commitment to make amends. The media was calling her the billionaire with a heart. Social media celebrated her inspirational transformation. Interview requests poured in by the dozens, and I should have been happy. I should have felt victorious, but something gnawed at me. Maybe it was too easy. Maybe people didn't change that quickly, or maybe I was just waiting for the other mask to fall. It was Friday afternoon when everything fell apart. I was in my office reviewing applications for the Valeria Fund when I heard the scream, not of pain, but of absolute fury. "How dare you?" Eleanor's voice cut through the walls like a missile. I dropped the papers and ran to her office. Teresa was already there, along with Gabriel and 3 executives, who looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. In the center of it all was a man in his 30s, rumpled suit, pale face, visibly trembling. "Mrs. Vance, just nothing." Eleanor stood behind her desk, her hands resting on the surface, leaning forward like a predator. "You lost $3 million due to a basic calculation error. An error a first-year university student wouldn't make. It was a software issue. I don't care if it was the software, your incompetence, or divine intervention. The result is the same, $3 million. I recognized that voice, that tone. It was the same voice she had used with me in the restaurant. Cold, cruel, designed to destroy. The man, Carlos, according to his ID, had tears in his eyes. "Please," Mrs. Vance, I have 2 children. My wife is pregnant. I can't lose this job. You should have thought about that before being so careless and stupid. And there it was. The word that cut like a knife. The absolute contempt. The dehumanization. Eleanor, my voice came out louder than I intended. Everyone turned to look at me. The executives with relief. Gabriel with something that looked like desperate hope. Teresa with warning in her eyes. And Eleanor looked at me with those gray eyes that had returned to their usual frigidity. Sarah, this does not concern you. Yes, it does concern me. I walked to the center of the office, because 3 weeks ago, you knelt on the floor of an apartment and promised you'd be different. Remember? This is different. This is business. Is it? I moved closer. Because it sounds exactly like you spoke before when you fired Claudia, when you destroyed my career, when you made 2 waitresses cry before you even met me. A muscle tensed in Eleanor's jaw. This man made a mistake that cost millions. And it's one mistake? I looked at Carlos. Is this the first time you've made a mistake like this? Yes, he replied quickly. I've been with the company for 5 years. My record is impeccable. It was a problem with the projection software that no one detected until— Enough. Eleanor raised a hand. Sarah, get out of this office. Now. No, the silence that followed was so dense it hurt to breathe. Excuse me? Eleanor's voice was dangerously low. I said, no. You hired me specifically for this, to stop you when you were about to do something Hector would have hated. Well, here I am, stopping you. Gabriel approached then, standing beside me. His voice trembled, but he spoke. Sarah's right, Mom. This is exactly what you used to do. What Dad hated. Eleanor turned to her son, and something dangerous gleamed in her eyes. You have no right to talk about what your father hated. No. And now there were tears in Gabriel's eyes. I was with him every day of his last 6 months. Do you know what he told me 2 weeks before he died? No one moved. No one breathed. He told me, Gabriel, your mother was the most compassionate woman I knew when we married, but power changed her. Success changed her. And I was so afraid of losing her that I never stopped her. That is my biggest regret. A tear rolled down Gabriel's cheek. He made me promise him something. He made me promise that I wouldn't make the same mistake, that I wouldn't let fear paralyze me while you became something unrecognizable. Gabriel. Eleanor's voice had softened, but he didn't stop. I've had nightmares my whole life, Mom. Nightmares where I become you, where I treat people as disposable objects, where I value money and power over basic humanity. And every time I wake from those nightmares, I promise myself I'll be different. He wiped his tears furiously. But you know what's the most terrifying? That sometimes when I'm under pressure, I hear your voice in my head telling me to be tough, not to show weakness, that people who make mistakes don't deserve second chances. He looked at Carlos, and I have to fight that voice every day. The silence that followed was broken by a sob, but it didn't come from Gabriel. It came from Eleanor. She slumped into her chair, covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders trembled. What am I doing? She whispered. What on earth am I doing? I approached her desk slowly. The executives had discreetly left. Only Gabriel, Teresa, Carlos, and I remained. Eleanor, I said softly, change isn't linear. It's not a single decision you make, and it's done. It's a choice you have to make again and again, especially when you're stressed, when you're scared, when you feel like you're losing control. She looked up. Her makeup was smudged. She looked vulnerable, human. I was so scared, she admitted. $3 million is. It's responsibility. It's broken trust. And my first instinct was to destroy, because that's what I know how to do. She turned to Carlos, who was still standing by the door, paralyzed. Carlos, how many years have you worked here? 5 years, ma'am. And in those 5 years, how many times have you exceeded expectations? Many, I believe. My evaluations have always been excellent. Eleanor nodded slowly, took the framed photograph of Valeria from her desk. She looked at it for a long moment. 5 years of excellence should not be erased by one mistake, especially one caused by a software glitch. She took a deep breath. You are not fired, Carlos, but you will work with the IT team to ensure this problem doesn't happen again, and you will take a system verification course. The company will pay for it. Carlos looked as if he was about to faint from relief. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. And Carlos, Eleanor interrupted him. I apologize for how I spoke to you, for calling you stupid. It was unprofessional, and it wasn't fair. I hope you can forgive me. Now Carlos was openly crying. He nodded repeatedly as he left the office. When the door closed, Eleanor looked at Gabriel. Your father was right, about everything. And you You deserve a mother who isn't the protagonist of your nightmares." Gabriel walked across the office and, to everyone's surprise, hugged his mother. She froze for a moment, then her arms wrapped around him, holding him as if he were the little boy he once was. "I'm sorry," Eleanor murmured into his hair. "For all the years, for all the times I made you feel you weren't enough, for becoming the reason you have nightmares." "You can be different, Mom," Gabriel said. "You just proved it. Just keep choosing it." Later that night, Eleanor called me to her office. She was alone, looking out the window at the city. "I thought it would be easier," she said without preamble. "I thought once I decided to change, I would just change. Real change is the hardest thing there is," I told her, "because you're fighting decades of patterns, of instincts, of defense mechanisms. I almost ruined it today, but you didn't. That's the difference." She turned to look at me, and for the first time since I met her, I saw something in her eyes I had never seen before. Real hope. "Do you think Hector would be proud?" I thought of the man who had spent 40 years loving this complicated, broken woman, who had seen her transform into someone he didn't recognize, who had died hoping she would find her way back. "I think," I said carefully, "that he would be proud that you're trying, and that's all anyone can ask." 6 months after that night at the Summit restaurant, I stood in the same ballroom where it all began. But this time I wasn't wearing a worn maroon uniform. I wore a navy blue dress that Eleanor had insisted on buying for me, and I wasn't serving tables. I was being honored. The ballroom was full, more than 200 people, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, families who had been helped by the Valeria Davies Foundation, reporters from the country's leading media outlets, and at the head table, Eleanor Vance, Gabriel, and Claudia Davies, together. The road to this moment had not been easy. It had been 6 months of steps forward and occasional steps backward, of small victories and painful relapses, of Eleanor learning, truly learning, to see people instead of resources, to feel instead of calculate, to be vulnerable instead of invincible. But we had arrived somehow. Against all odds, we had arrived here. "Sarah Thompson," the presenter's voice boomed in the ballroom. "Please come forward to receive the Valeria Davies Award for the defense of human dignity." My legs trembled as I walked to the stage. The applause was deafening, but what made me cry was seeing Claudia standing, applauding with tears streaming down her face. Beside her, Eleanor also stood with that expression I had learned to recognize, pride mixed with gratitude. Claudia was the one who presented me with the award. It was a crystal sculpture with Valeria's image engraved on it, that ice cream photo that had been on Eleanor's desk for months. "Thank you," Claudia whispered as she hugged me, "for seeing what everyone else chose to ignore, for not letting power win." When I took the microphone, I looked out at the audience. I recognized so many faces. Teresa, who had given me that first warning. Chef David from the restaurant. Carlos, the executive who almost lost his job. Dr. Miller from the hospital. And in the back row, almost hidden, Mr. Davies, the manager of the Summit, who had fired me half a year ago. "I don't deserve this award," I began, and my voice resonated in the ballroom, because all I did was something any decent person would have done. To tell the truth when silence was more convenient. To defend dignity when it was easier to look the other way. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But if this award represents anything, I hope it represents this, that none of us are beyond redemption, that people who seem like monsters are often just human beings who lost their way, and that sometimes all they need is for someone, anyone, to dare to show them the mirror. I looked directly at Eleanor. 6 months ago, I met a woman everyone feared, a woman who had built empires but had lost her humanity in the process, a woman whom her own husband feared had become something unrecognizable. Eleanor didn't look away. Her eyes glistened, but she maintained her composure, and today that woman is here. Not because she is perfect, not because she has erased all her mistakes, but because she chooses every day to be different, to be better, to be the person her husband always knew she could be. The applause began slowly, then grew to fill the ballroom. Eleanor stood up and, to my surprise, walked to the stage. She hadn't planned this. It wasn't on the program, but when Eleanor Vance decided to do something, the rules stopped mattering. She stood beside me on stage, took a second microphone, and spoke. "Good evening, everyone." Her voice was firm but soft. I know I wasn't scheduled to speak now, but there are things that need to be said. Most of you know me as Eleanor Vance, the businesswoman, the billionaire, the woman who built an empire from scratch. What many don't know is how much I lost in that process. She looked towards Gabriel, who smiled at her encouragingly. "I lost my marriage, although my husband never left me. I lost my relationship with my son, although he never stopped loving me. I lost my humanity, although it was always there, buried under layers of ambition and fear. Her voice cracked slightly. And I lost. I almost lost the opportunity to be someone my family could be proud of, someone I could be proud of myself. She turned to me. Sarah saved me, not with sweet words or gentle understanding, but with the brutal truth I needed to hear. She showed me the monster I had become, and then, incredibly, she gave me the opportunity to be something more. Now tears streamed freely down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. The Valeria Davies Foundation isn't just about helping families with medical expenses. It is my promise that no other mother will have to choose between working and saving her child. It is my acknowledgement that power without compassion is just cruelty disguised as success. She walked to the edge of the stage, looking directly at the audience. And I want everyone here to know something. If you ever worked for me, and I treated you cruelly, if I fired you without compassion, if I made you feel less than human, I am sorry. Deeply, sincerely, completely, I am sorry. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. I cannot change the past, but I can change the future. And that is my promise to all of you, to this city, to the thousands of people who work in my companies, that every day I will choose to be better, not perfect, but better. She stepped down from the stage and walked directly to Claudia. In front of 200 people, she knelt. Claudia Davies, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I never will, but I want you to know that Valeria will not be forgotten. Her name will be in every life we save, in every family we help, in every decision I make, reminding me that policies are never more important than people. Claudia was also crying. Now she knelt down in front of Eleanor, taking her hands. You can't give me back my daughter, Claudia said, her voice trembling. But you can ensure that her death was not in vain, and you are doing it. So yes, Eleanor, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because Valeria would have wanted me to. She always forgave. They embraced then, two women united by tragedy, but choosing to build something beautiful from the ashes. There wasn't a dry eye in that ballroom. Gabriel came onto the stage afterwards, his voice hoarse with emotion. My father, Hector Vance, spent 40 years loving a complicated woman. He taught me that true love doesn't mean abandoning people when they're difficult. It means holding up a mirror so they can see themselves. And if they refuse to look, it means having the courage to walk away. He looked at his mother. Sarah did what my father always wanted me to do, but I was too afraid. She held the mirror firmly until Mom had no choice but to look. And Dad, wherever you are, I want you to know. She did it. Mom found her way back. After the ceremony, as the ballroom slowly emptied, I found myself on the balcony looking out at the city. The lights sparkled like terrestrial stars. Somewhere out there were families sleeping soundly because the Valeria Fund had paid for their treatments. There were employees going to work without fear because their bosses had learned that humanity matters more than profits. Beautiful view, isn't it? I turned. Eleanor was there with 2 glasses of champagne. It is, I agreed, taking a glass. Claudia asked me to be the godmother of her next project, Eleanor said softly. She's writing a book about Valeria, about grief, about forgiveness. And I told her, yes, and that I would use all my contacts to make sure it gets published. That it reaches everyone who needs to hear that pain doesn't have to define you, that you can choose to build something beautiful, even from the most devastating loss. We drank in silence for a moment. Sarah, there's something I need to ask you. What? Why did you really do it? Why did you risk everything, your job, your future, your security to confront a woman who could destroy you? I thought of that night in the restaurant, of the glass breaking, of the decision to choose dignity over security. Because, I finally said, I had seen too many times how power crushes good people. I had worked for bosses who treated employees as disposable objects. I had seen colleagues cry in bathrooms because someone with money decided their feelings didn't matter. I looked at Eleanor directly, and I was tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of people like me having to accept mistreatment because we needed the jobs. Tired of a world where money bought the right to be cruel. So you decided to change it. I decided to try. I didn't know if it would work. Honestly, I expected to be destroyed. Eleanor smiled, a real, warm smile. You know, Hector used to say that the bravest people aren't the ones who aren't afraid. They're the ones who are afraid but act anyway. You are that person, Sarah. I just did what anyone should do, but they don't. That's the point. Most people choose safety. They choose silence. They choose to look the other way. You chose to face the monster. She turned to look at me completely. That's why I want to offer you something. Not as your boss, but as your partner. My heart raced. I've been thinking about expanding the Valeria Fund, turning it into a full foundation, one that not only helps with medical expenses but also advocates for changes in labor policies, for employee protections, for corporate responsibility. And I need someone to lead it, someone who understands what it feels like to be on the other side of power. Eleanor, I don't have experience. You have something better than experience. You have conviction, you have courage, and you have the trust of the people we want to help because they know you are one of them. She extended her hand. What do you say, Sarah? Do you want to change the world with me? I looked at her outstretched hand. 6 months ago, this woman had been my enemy, my nightmare, the symbol of everything that was wrong with power and privilege. Now she was something different. Not perfect, never perfect, but trying, striving, choosing every day to be better. I took her hand, yes, but with one condition. Which is, if you ever start to become the old Eleanor again, if you start treating people as objects, if you forget why we're doing this, promise that you'll listen when I tell you, that you won't fire me, that you won't silence me. Eleanor squeezed my hand firmly. I promise. In Hector's memory, in Valeria's honor, I promise. That night, as I prepared to leave, Gabriel found me in the parking lot. Sarah, wait. I turned. He looked lighter somehow, as if a weight he had carried for years had finally lifted. I just wanted to say thank you for giving me my mother back, for teaching me that courage doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it just comes from telling the truth when everyone else is lying. Your father would be proud of you, Gabriel, of both of you. He smiled, a smile that looked a lot like Eleanor's when it was genuine. I know, and I think I can finally sleep without nightmares. As I drove home that night in my own car, not on public transit anymore, I thought of everything that had changed in 6 months. I had started as an anonymous waitress in an upscale restaurant, serving people who never truly saw me. I had ended up as the director of a foundation that would change thousands of lives. I had known Eleanor Vance as a monster. Now I knew her as a complicated human being who had lost her way, but had found the courage to search for it again. And I had learned something fundamental, that real change is possible, not easy, not fast, not perfect, but possible when people are willing to look in the mirror, when they are willing to admit their mistakes, when they are willing to choose again and again to be better. That night, before sleeping, I received a message from Eleanor. Hector was right about everything, but especially about this. The right people arrive exactly when you need them. Thank you for arriving, Sarah, for staying, for not giving up on me when it would have been easier. I replied simply, thank you for being willing to change. That's the hardest part of all. And as I closed my eyes, I thought of Valeria Davies, a child I never knew, but who had changed everything, whose name now meant hope instead of tragedy, whose smile in that photograph with the ice cream. I would forever remember that behind every policy, every decision, every action, there are real lives, real people who deserve to be seen, to be valued, to be treated with dignity. And if a waitress and a billionaire could learn that lesson together, then maybe, just maybe, the world could too.